Hi, my name is Suravi Dhar.
Hi, my name is Arul. We live in Fremont, California, and we're going to 10th grade in American high school.
Some things I like to do are painting and baking. My favorite food is samosas and I like to dance.
I like to play soccer and go to the beach. My favorite dish is Rogan Josh, and my favorite drink is mango lassi.
Today we will talk about Article 370, how it came about, its abrogation, and what the future may hold. To get a little better perspective, let us step back in time to before India's independence and see what was happening in India and Kashmir that led up to the adoption of Article 370. Pre-independence India was divided into two areas, one under direct British rule and the other under the rule of the princely states. One of these was the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir.
By the 1930s, the demand for Swaraj or self-rule was growing. This led to the British proposing dominion status for India, in which the British India and the princely states would be joined together as a federated dominion of India. However, Congress and the Muslims were not able to reach an agreement on how this federation should be structured. Finally, the Government of India Act of 1935 was passed. This act was supposed to provide autonomy and establish a federation. All aspects of the act were never fully enacted due to opposition from the princely states. The British got distracted by the start of World War II in 1939. The role India should play in the war amplified the divisions between various Indian parties and led to the failed Quit India movement. In 1940, the resolution for the establishment of a separate homeland for the Muslims of British India passed in the annual session of the All India Muslim League held in Lahore.
The war and ongoing agitations also made the British realize that after the war they would not be able to govern India effectively. Finally, on June 3, 1947, Mountbatten, the last Viceroy of India, announced the partitioning of British India into India and Pakistan. The Indian Independence Act of 1947 was passed, and at 11:57 on August 14, 1947, Pakistan was declared a separate nation. Then, at 12:02 a.m. on August 15, 1947, India became a sovereign and democratic nation. At this point, the princely states had the choice to either join India, Pakistan, or remain independent. The state of Jammu and Kashmir was ruled by a Dogra Hindu king named Hari Singh, with a Muslim majority population. Raja Hari Singh decided to remain independent.
Pakistan did not accept this decision, claiming J&K as part of Pakistan based on the majority Muslim population. On October 1947, and with the support of the Pakistani government, Pashtun tribes and Pakistan Army irregulars entered Kashmir with the purpose of forcibly taking over the state. With tribals gaining ground, Maharaja Hari Singh approached India for assistance against these forces. India dispatched troops to the location to fight them off under one condition: J&K would accede to India. On October 26, 1947, Hari Singh signed the Instrument of Accession. It is important to note the various clauses, especially 7 and 8.
Clause 7 essentially says that Kashmir is not committed to accept the Constitution of India when enacted, and Clause 8 asserts that the sovereignty of Kashmir is to be maintained. In the years prior to 1947, Jammu and Kashmir had seen a struggle against the rule of the Maharaja. The Kashmir Muslim Conference had been formed in 1932 and renamed the National Conference in 1939 to struggle for the rights of all oppressed Kashmiris and the creation of an independent J&K. Sheikh Abdullah, its leader, had been jailed for his role in the Quit Kashmir of 1942.
Following the signing of the Instrument of Accession, Maharaja Hari Singh was forced to abdicate the throne and left Kashmir. He made his own son Karan Singh the regent of Kashmir and invited Sheikh Abdullah to head the interim government. In the early days after India, the important task of drafting the constitution was in full swing. The Constituent Assembly had been formed in 1946. Representing Jammu and Kashmir were Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah, Motiram Baigra, Mirza Muhammad Afzal Beg, and Maulana Muhammad Saeed Masoodi.
Sheikh Abdullah strongly advocated for autonomy and wanted ironclad provisions for the autonomy of J&K. This was not acceptable to the likes of Ambedkar. Gopal Swami Iyengar was appointed by Jawaharlal Nehru as a cabinet minister without a portfolio to look after Kashmir affairs. He was also a member of the drafting committee that formulated the Indian Constitution. In this capacity, he worked hard to get special status for J&K. He was able to convince the Constituent Assembly to adopt Article 306A to the draft constitution. This article stated certain provisions of the Constitution would not apply to J&K, limited the power of Parliament to make laws for the state, required the concurrence of the government of the state, and required the recommendation of the State Constituent Assembly before the President could issue any notifications regarding this article. 306A was adopted on October 1949. This was a precursor to Article 370 of the Constitution.
Article 370 was adopted in the final version of the Constitution under Part 21 for temporary, transitional, and special provisions. It states that the provisions of the article are temporary with respect to the state of J&K. The article was enforced on November 17, 1952. The government of India made a commitment that the people of the state would determine their internal constitution and the nature and extent of the Indian Union's jurisdiction over the state. The political reason for giving J&K this special status is that India realized it was a disputed territory, and secondly, by providing the state citizens with special privileges, it would win over their hearts and minds. This article limited Indian jurisdiction in the state to the areas of defense, foreign affairs, communications, and ancillary matters, as was agreed to in the Instrument of Accession.
The making of laws on other subjects mentioned in the Union List and the Concurrent List, as specified with the President, can only happen with the concurrence of the state government. The President of India can declare Article 370 non-operative, or Parliament can amend and modify it only on the recommendations of the Constituent Assembly of the state. In 1952, J&K and the Government of India went into the Delhi Agreement, which regarded their future relationship. In 1954, the Constituent Assembly of J&K approved their accession to India, and the President issued a Constitutional Order of 1954, which was applicable only to the state of J&K. Article 35A was introduced and inserted through this Constitution. Noteworthy aspects of this constitutional order, along with 35A, are:
Number 1. The state of J&K has its own constitution and is administered accordingly.
Number 2. Special rights are guaranteed to the permanent residents of the state regarding public employment, acquisition of immovable property, settlement, and government scholarships.
Number 3. No outsider can buy property in J&K. Also, a girl getting married to a boy from outside the state of J&K loses her right to ancestral property.
Article 370 was abrogated on August 5, 2019, by using the third clause in the article, which allowed the President to declare the Constitution inoperative with exceptions and modifications. The President needed to be recommended by the State Constituent Assembly to do so, but the State Constituent Assembly was disbanded in 1957. To deal with this problem, the President added a clause to Article 367, which deals with how the Constitution is interpreted. He changed the name State Constituent Assembly to Legislative Assembly of the State. This in turn meant that the Legislative Assembly of the state was now dissolved. With the newly named assembly suspended, the order stated that a reference to the Legislative Assembly was to be seen as a reference to the Governor of Jammu and Kashmir. Since the Governor is appointed by the Government of India, it now means that the Indian government could serve as a Legislative Assembly. By having this new status, they were able to legally remove Article 370.
With Article 370 taken away, more people can invest in land and businesses in Kashmir. Because of 370, not many large industries were able to develop in Kashmir, and there were no important investments in education, health, and tourism. By removing the restrictions, it encourages people to start or expand businesses in Kashmir, which in turn boosts employment for local Kashmiri. Not only will people in India be able to invest in Kashmir, but so will outside countries, especially in the tourism section. Hotels and other buildings can be constructed, bringing people from around the world, opening up new opportunities to make money. The increase in tourism would also help local entrepreneurs make national and global connections. Another benefit would be the ability to build specialized treatment centers for illnesses and invest in improved healthcare. With doctors and researchers being able to come into Kashmir more freely, there can be big steps made to improve quality of life.
Even the youth of Kashmir will feel the impact as more schools can be built and funded, giving everyone a chance at having an education. Many children whose families have money can study abroad or go to a private institution. Meanwhile, most of the time, the poor do not even get a decent building for learning. With the abrogation of Article 370, all of the children of Kashmir can have a chance of getting an education, which can help some of them get a job, earn money, and turn their lives around. A big concern is that without Article 370, the land owned by Kashmiri citizens could be taken away, but that is false. The removal of 370 does not change the ownership of land, so anyone who owns land in Kashmir will not have to part with it. Also, outside of Kashmir, the price for land has gone up, but inside Kashmir, it has not fluctuated as much. Now, without 370, landowners who wish to sell their land can make a lot more money from selling it.
Since Kashmir and the rest of India had two separate constitutions, multiple influential laws passed in India could not be applied to the people of Kashmir. This deprived local residents of Kashmir the benefits these legislations brought. Some examples of these progressive laws are the right to education enacted on August 4, 2009, and it stresses the importance of free education for children from 6 to 14 years of age. Another law would be the National Commission for Minorities Act, which was set up in 1992 to protect the interests of minorities. Along with these two laws, there are other laws that help protect women, children, and disabled people.
How you take the news of the abrogation depends on who you are. Many people were happy with this because Kashmir was being fully integrated with India, and they hoped this would bring down terrorism. Although Kashmiri Muslims were in shock. For the last 70 years, they had been fighting for independence and merge with Pakistan. Now there's just increased chance of demographic changes and land, jobs, and other opportunities taken away by outsiders. This decision was come to without the Muslim community's consent, so it is still remains to see how they'll react. There has been promise of economic development, but there are no major projects underway.
How is this affecting our Kashmiri Pandit community? It has been a year now. Curfews and blackouts are still the norm in Srinagar. Will the ground conditions go back to being normal enough to allow Kashmiri Pandits to return? As of now, it does not look like there is any change. On August 5th this year, there was celebration in Ayodhya for the rebuilding of the Ram Janam Bhoomi temple. But the Kashmiri Temples and Shrines Bill, which talks about the neglect and destruction of Hindu temples, is still lavishing. The BJP says it will commit to a re-establishment plan, but it has conveniently pushed it back to after the J&K polls. So all we can do right now is hope that the conditions will go back to being stable enough to allow Kashmiri Pandits to return and live safely in Kashmir.